When you think Pixar, what movies come to mind? If you're a normal human, you probably say something like Up or Inside Out. If you're a more enlightened individual such as myself, you probably said something along the lines of Cars 2 and The Good Dinosaur. While Pixar is known for making some of the greatest animated films of all time, like every animation studio, they're not immune to making a few mediocre films here and there. And before you ask, no, I do not think The Boss Baby 2 is one of DreamWorks' mediocre films. If you think that, then you have no right to watch my channel. Often when Pixar makes a more forgettable or mediocre film, it doesn't have any real effect on the world of animation as a whole. Whether it be poor critical reception or box office returns, for every misstep, Pixar creates 10 new cinematic classics to compensate for it. And that's what's so admirable about Pixar as a studio. While they may create sequels or spin-offs, they're always willing to take a chance on something risky that challenges its audience and pushes the kinds of stories that can be told, not just for animation, but for kids as well. Can you tell where the punchline is coming in? Lightyear is not really one of those films. Released back in 2022, Lightyear is the first and probably only spin-off movie of the Toy Story franchise. Establishing this as the film that made Andy fall in love with the character of Buzz Lightyear, it didn't really do that for audiences, as this was Pixar's lowest grossing film ever. Now, I truly believe the poor box office of it had more to do with COVID and people just willing to wait for it to drop on Disney Plus than the quality of the film. But it really got me wondering, what does this film really offer? Often whenever there's a prequel or origin movie in an established universe, it's able to build upon the facts that we already know and show how said character or world grew into what we know it to be. Lightyear isn't really that. Because Buzz for years was established as a toy in the quote-unquote real world, no one was ever clamoring for an origin story about him or really curious to learn more about his adventures because he's plastic. And before you yell at me, I know there was the animated show that was The Adventures of Buzz Lightyear, but that has no relevancy to the movie, so it has no relevancy to me at the moment. So, making an origin story for him isn't necessarily a bad idea, but you have to have a really strong story in order for me to care about this, and this doesn't really have that. Whenever you think of the best Pixar movies, like Inside Out and Soul, their stories, while simple on paper, offer so much depth with their characters and themes that you can never get them out of your head. Pixar does their best when they can take a simple idea and grow it into something greater than we could have possibly imagined. Lightyear is just a science fiction film. That's it. The Pixar magic isn't present in its story. Its themes boil down to basically just DreamWorks makes teamwork, and by the time the film ends, you'll leave hollow and empty inside, like after watching a Michael Bay Transformer movie. Okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but you get the idea I'm going for. Rather than craft a narrative that challenges Buzz as a character and makes us grow to love and understand him more, it becomes this generically safe story that instantly leaves your brain as soon as the movie ends. Which is a shame, because when the film starts, it's honestly pretty engaging. When Buzz and his crew get marooned on the planet, he blames himself and volunteers to do the lightspeed tests, but every time he jumps forward, he goes forward in time for years. Despite knowing the risks and what he could lose, he keeps at it because of the guilt he feels. This is an insanely cool idea, and it's what the entire movie should have been about. But, because it's technically an origin movie, we have to throw in Zurg, and the big robot man doesn't really fit into the existential crisis plot of Buzz. Well, it kinda does, but not well. See, and spoiler alert for anyone that cares, it's revealed that Zurg is actually Buzz from the future. He wants the lightspeed formula so he could travel back in time and stop the crash from ever happening in the first place. An idea that, while not bad, comes way too late in the film to leave any kind of impact on the audience. It sadly falls into the category of Disney plot twist villains that I'm honestly so sick of at this point. After the first 20 or so minutes, it just becomes goofy fun space adventure, and it just isn't as fun as the film wants it to be. I don't think any of the new characters are bad, they're decently written and performed, but like everything else in the film, there's just nothing to their characters that calls for you to remember them. It's not enough for these characters to have good comedic beats and identifiable personalities. If that emotional attachment isn't there, then they won't leave any impact and therefore won't sell any toys like Disney wants. However, that's not my biggest pet peeve with this movie. A good sci-fi movie is able to establish a world that is easy to identify and understand that can allow you to get lost with your imagination when it comes to the possibilities of said world. While something like Star Wars may not have the most creative worlds, they make up for it with ideas like the Jedi, its creatures, and big space battles. Something like the Orville not only introduces fascinating concepts and ideas, but it pushes the kinds of stories that can be told in this genre. Lightyear doesn't really do any of that. The world they crash on, aside from vines that just grab people, doesn't seem threatening or even interesting in the slightest. To make it such a big deal they're stuck here, and then to not even explore the world they're stuck on just feels lazy. Which is strange because they travel across a lot of it And it's mostly just rocks. Counter that with another box office Disney bomb from 2022, Strange World. That title definitely fits with that world that was created. It's vast, it's varied, everything from the landscapes to its creatures make me want to explore every inch of the planet to see what's around the next corner. Here, I know if I go around the next corner, I'll just find another rock. And after almost failing geology in college, this still won't get me interested in the idea of rocks. As for interesting ideas and concepts, this doesn't really have any at all. Again, the world this movie tries to create is so barren and empty that we don't have a good grasp on what the Space Ranger Corps is, who exactly the Zurg robots are, and how Buzz gained control over them. Even the time travel idea near the end has been done before and doesn't make me wonder what could be possible with it in this world. And a lot of this, I think, stems from the biggest misstep of the movie, that being it's animated. Now, before you murder me in the comments, I am not saying that this movie being animated is bad. Far from it. Everything from its stellar lighting, animations, and textures are astounding. Pixar continues to step up their game with each film, and this is no exception. That being said, in terms of what the story is offering, I think it would have served it better if it was live action. See, animation works best when it makes the impossible possible. You can create worlds, characters, and ideas that just aren't possible in live action. Even films that seem like they could translate well into live action, like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, end up becoming this bland, hollow mess that no one remembers 2 months after they release. But a film like this, with how its story, world, and characters are, I honestly think it would have served it better if it was live action. With it being in live action, there could have been more room to create a longer runtime to explore the ideas that are presented but not given the time to be fleshed out. You'd feel the emptiness of the world better and would thus be able to understand Buzz's wish to escape from the planet, and even the action scenes would feel more exciting because of it. I'm not saying this movie should never have been animated, but as the film is, it never really makes a case as to why it should have been, even if the animation is fantastic. I know I'm being really critical on a movie that no one really cares for or remembers, but that's exactly why I am. Pixar has, for the most part, been the animation studio to point to for films that are not only insanely imaginative, but challenging for kids when most studios choose not to be. For all the Minions and Mario movies we get, Pixar has a Monsters Inc. and Turning Red to cleanse our palates. Animation studios should always strive for creating works of art that not only make kids' imaginations run wild, but should challenge them as well. Too often do studios just make a movie that's mind mush for kids, and I wouldn't say Lightyear is that at all, but it isn't up to standard with what Pixar is capable of. I love the idea of exploring Buzz's character, and I think this movie offers some interesting ideas. I swear, that opening 20 minutes is all this movie should have been, but with what we ended up getting, I kind of wish we got something original instead. Pixar will always be my favorite animation studio, and I hope as they continue to make more films, we get more Inside Outs than we do Lightyears and Cars 3s.